Everyone's here with me on set. Seth, you just heard what Joe Kent said, right? Speaking out for the first time. You've got this religious ruling, the fatwa. I mean, I was with the Iranian president, Mahmoud Pezeshkian, in September, and it's the first thing he started off with. They always would say that. Like, the religious leader at the time, Ayatollah Khamenei Sr., had said we would not develop a nuclear weapon, and then he went on to say, by the way, if we wanted one by now, we would have had one. But Joe Kent is backing that.
Yeah, I think what he is indicating, and we've heard this over the last several weeks, is that Iran was not on the verge of having a nuclear weapon. I think the challenge, hearing it from the Israelis, as I spoke to them over the last few months, is Iran was weak. They were vulnerable to an attack. So I think the Israeli position was that there was going to be potentially no better time than right now. Hezbollah was weaker than it had been. The Iranian regime, the U.S. and the Israelis had struck last year, and the Israelis got air dominance over Iran in 4 days. The Russians don't even have that in Ukraine after we're in the fifth year. So I think there was an opportunity. There was nothing imminent in that sense.
Right. And I guess there's also a question of even if they are correct that this was the best time, does not still mean that it was a good time. I mean, that is the real question. We don't know, right? I mean,
it was an opportunity. I think it's fair to say that there was a target, there was an opportunity.
And but where we are now, as you see escalatory, whether we're on a formal ladder or just going up and up, General Marks, what we have seen. Now, center of Riyadh, that's new. A cluster munition used in Tel Aviv within the past 24 hours that came off a missile that had not yet been used in this conflict. Right. They had been using some of their older missiles. So are there weapons that Iran has not used yet in their arsenal? Now, whether they are destroyed or whether they're being saved up, I understand is a question.
Right.
But what have you not seen that you know they had?
Well, Aaron, in case of the missile that just hit Tel Aviv, a couple of ways to look at it. One, It's new and they're going to roll that thing out, and there are more of those that are available, or that they're at the end of their normal stockpile.
And they're
moving now they're going to move into the new stuff that may or may not have been tested.
Yeah.
The additional thing about what we haven't seen, to date, we have not seen anti-ship ballistic missiles, which I think is telling. It also indicates that they were probably waiting for more tankers to make themselves available in the Straits, or if the United States Navy had taken on that escort mission, then they would have been vulnerable at that point, albeit the Navy has anti-ship missile capabilities. The other thing is there's no discussion about the submarine capabilities that the Iranians have. Again, I have to assume that our subs have already taken care of that. And then the Iranians have talked about mining the Straits. We don't know that. Hasn't been detected. Again, the capabilities exist to detect, identify, and then render safe all that stuff.
I want to get to the subs in a second because you're talking about their Navy, and that's central to something I want to ask. But first, when General Marks talks about those anti-ship missiles, those which are understood to have come with a lot of support from Russia, and we understand Russia's involvement here, and Seth's talked a lot about this, has been intricate and detailed. So how significant is Russia's role right now, as you understand it?
I think to assess that, you have to look at what the role has been in the period leading up to the war, because it's not something that just starts now.
Yep.
We've been monitoring the physical trips and interactions between Russia's top intelligence officers, both from the GRE and from the FSB. That peaked and has plateaued, actually has remained at a very high level at the start of the war in Ukraine. Part of it was explained by the fact that Iran started providing Russia
the Shahed drones,
which Russia in turn upgraded, developed, and added something that Iran never had, which was a second-to-none anti-jamming device or system that the Russians have. And in subsequent trips that we monitored, of the same people that are using the devices or the Shaheds in Ukraine, they went back to share their findings and their improvements. And this was a requirement, apparently, that Iran had imposed on Russia for them to get the Shaheds. So this has been going on continuously. And part of this cooperation was not just military cooperation, it was also counterintelligence and also repressive sharing, like best practices in how to suppress
and how to suppress crowds
protest
and
crowds, because some of the people that traveled were the same guys who were in charge of repressions in Russia. So this has been very, very intense. What we see now is a careful and not transparent providing of assistance. I think there's still some appearance, at least, of holding back and not providing the full. There's no trips, there's no physical travel of advisors from Russia to Iran right now, but there's a lot of data being shared. That's what we do see. We don't see what is being shared, but the volume of data between the same phones and devices of the same people who traveled before in the direction of abroad, which we assume is now Iran because it started peaking after the invasion or after the attack, is commensurate with images, sharing of images, which is what we would expect Russia to be providing to
For
Iran.
targeting.
For targeting, right. And again, coming back to what Russia lacked at the beginning of the war in Ukraine was precise spatial and satellite data on Ukraine. They found out they had outdated data from their own satellites. So they traveled to China to get the latest and best 3D and color photography from Chinese satellites. And that was an important thing for a Russian army. We believe that we're seeing the same thing in Iran now. Iran needs this micro data that only Russia and China can provide.
I mean, it's stunning when you look at that, though, that the back and forth and now the data being shared. General Marks.
Yeah,
in the context of Trump pulling back sanctions on Putin, enabling him to sell more crude oil.
Doesn't make sense.
No.
If you're looking at trying to advance what our objectives are in Iran, and we haven't really heard those stated clearly. What is the desired end state?
No.
Is it all about nukes, missiles, and proxies? Which I think is probably the objective. And now I think we're into a phase where I think the way to describe it is we started, I think, with strategic clarity, with tactical brilliance, and now we're getting lost.
Yes.
And is this now about regime change, which was not a priori what was talking about? So how we engage with China, how we engage with Russia, and I tell you, I think both of them come out of this in a winning position or a positive position.
It's incredible just what you lay out there on the data and the flights and the back and forth. You mentioned the subs, okay? Right. The subs, Iranian subs. Now, Seth, this is a question because when General Marks is saying, well, where are those subs and are they still there? Well, an Israeli source told CNN today that Israel had struck Iranian naval assets in the Caspian Sea, okay? Now, 11 days ago, Trump said this.
We wiped out their Navy. The Navy is now at the bottom of the sea.
Now, we wiped out their Navy. The Navy's now at the bottom of the sea. But today, 11 days later, Israel's saying they're still striking Iranian naval assets. So how's that happening?
Well, we also obliterated their nuclear program, too.
Last summer, that's right.
We still struck targets. Look, I think the reality is, regardless of what the rhetoric is, that the Iranian Navy has been degraded, but it still has capabilities. I mean, two things along these lines. First is the Iranian Navy has never been particularly strong. After the Iran-Iraq War, the Iranians put most of their capabilities not into big conventional forces, but into asymmetric ones, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, including its Quds Force. And even on the Navy side, I think the most dangerous part has been the naval side of the IRGC, which includes their small attack boats, ones which are capable of laying 1, 2, 3 mines. Mm-hmm. They had hundreds of them at the beginning of this war, according to the most recent assessments, our most recent assessments. It is highly likely that a number of them have been destroyed, but not all of them. Yeah. And it doesn't take a lot to really cause concern in the Strait of Hormuz when you still have some mine-laying capabilities from small attack boats. So when we talk about the Navy, I think they do have capabilities to do things like lay mines, and we don't know about the status of their submersibles.
We have a significant mine countermeasure capability, but what Seth just described is kind of top of mind as we now start to talk about securing passage through the
tanker CEOs of oil, they're not going to put their crews at possible death, right?
Well,
Unless it's not a risk.
And the risk premiums are going off the charts.
Right, and then there's insurance. Christo, I just want to play something. Joe Kent, the counterterror official in that interview, just said something else. Let me play it.
There was no intelligence that said, hey, on whatever day it was, March 1st, the Iranians are going to launch this big sneak attack. They're going to do some kind of a 9/11 Pearl Harbor, et cetera. They're going to attack one of our bases. There was none of that intelligence. Again, back to what we know about the Iranians, they're very, very deliberate with the escalation ladder. And again, they're only deliberate under President Trump's leadership because they knew and they took President Trump very, very seriously.
Okay, Christo, I'm just curious because you have this is the head of counterterror for the United States. He just stepped aside. He's saying these things about Trump. You have NATO not backing Trump. You have Emmanuel Macron, who is sort of maybe out there as would he consider when others hadn't, categorically saying, no, we are not with you. Okay, how does Putin see Trump right now?
Well, it's not a one-dimensional consequence for Putin at the moment. We have to be careful and not to assume that all of this is helping him. What is helping him clearly is the oil price. I mean, most of the Russian economists, in the privacy of their kitchens, were expecting that the Russian economy will collapse before the end of this year, in a way that they would not be able to maintain and sustain the war effort in Ukraine. Now that has changed because suddenly there's this booster injection, right? But a second reason for Putin to be happy is obviously the division, the further division in the West and in NATO that was again accelerated through this non-coordinated attack on Iran, which may have been an opportunistic choice, but not coordinated and therefore not necessarily strategically right. At the same time, if we look at what is negative for Putin, we have to understand that even before this happened, there was a division within the Kremlin, within the power elite in Russia. And we've talked on your show about this, that there was this militarized, like extremely far-right group within the military that really believes that Putin is being liberal and too slow on attacking the West, attacking striking back at the main adversary, which is Russia. Now suddenly they're seeing an opportunity for a proxy attack on the main adversary. And they still think that Putin is not doing it strongly enough. And part of that is because of this ongoing discussion and negotiation with the United States, with Trump, which a lot of this militarized elite thinks that is a business discussion as opposed to something in the national interest of Russia. So all of these are creating kernels of instability within Russia at the moment. And I wouldn't be surprised, and I don't expect that to be the main scenario, but I wouldn't be surprised that this results in that, in a repeat of what Prigozhin did a couple of years ago. Because these people think that that Putin does not understand the danger to their system that what has happened in Iran is signifying.
That's an incredible thing to say. Prigozhin, of course, was the general who marched on Moscow and ended up dead in a plane crash not long thereafter. Out front next, our